sorry that these great words of wisdom were lost in the recording here. But back to this. So this he has like a sample of 2000. The Chinese did the same thing. They tried the results, but I never saw the actual results of those. And then you look at what the Taiwanese did, is very close tracking, but the number of tests in Taiwan were basically proportional what we did in the US. And we're now falling into this particular phenomenon that we say, well, we are trying to open the economy because there is a trade-off, because you lose people if you open the economy because there'll be more infection, but at the same time, you will lose people if the economy goes very bad. So there are real trade-offs here that need to be considered. I mean, this is the job of the federal government or the state government to think. One other thing to think is 3 or 4 states in the US, maybe a few more, are bigger than most nations. Okay, California is the 5th economy in the world in size. Okay, Texas is close to there. New York comes 3rd. And so comparing the entire US with France, it's a little bit of a mismatch. But there are information coming from other countries that might be more reliable than our information. And the question here is what kind of policies you want to support. The whole idea of doing this analysis is not our happiness, but the idea of doing this analysis is to support policies that might serve to public welfare. And so the question is, what kind of analysis you want to do? What kind of numbers you can rely on? And let me stop here and see if you guys have any comments.
Hi, Professor. I have a question.
Yes.
I saw that we want to kind of do a test based on a sample, but the question is that we can only test a limited sample and only at that time. It can be biased because you can see that maybe it's that patient, that one is not a patient at that time, but maybe several days later he is a patient. And the problem is that because we can't do that on the population because we don't have enough test kits, then we can't do continuous monitoring on it because you can see we only have a limited sample and we can't have the information continuously from any person. That's a problem.
So why are you asking a question? How would you deal with that? Not a question.
I think that if
what ideas you have.
Yeah, I think that it's of course a very good idea to do a random sampling, but we couldn't do that at one time. We should continue monitoring those people for a time period. Then we can have more useful information.
Okay. And how would you monitor them?
Just like give them tests, maybe every several days, and we also need to have collect other information from them, like their activity, their routes, their GPS information, and their jobs, and maybe we can also collect some rate, how frequent they have contact with other people, and maybe we can also collect information from those people who contact them and see the network. I think that can be helpful if we can have all those information.
Okay, so what are the big policy questions at this moment? Okay, seems that in New York, maybe a little bit less in New Jersey, the overflow of hospitals problem has been managed. So we are not worrying about so much about enough respirators. Okay, but what are the big policy questions now? Big policy question at this moment, I guess, is where can you start opening the economy and under what conditions. This is what President Trump had, a 15-page guidelines. 2 weeks, increasing hospital population, and there are all kinds of criteria. So that's one big public policy question. So how are you going to measure it? I think you said something like using exogenous variables to monitor. Like I think that's what South Korea and Taiwan are doing, particularly Taiwan. They are doing very careful monitoring of anyone they think that might be infected. So guys, any other ideas? Come on.
Yeah, actually, I'm more concerned about the test accuracy because some doctors, I talked with the doctors, they told me that the virus can only be test positive only if your virus values reach a peak value in your body. So that's why some people tested are infected. Maybe at that time they were tested negative just because their virus value is low in their body, but that doesn't mean they are totally recovered. So that's I'm more concerned about. I mean, their current test accuracy is not very accurate because we are more concerned about the timely test. We want have the results as quickly as possible, but we are not concerned about the accuracy.
I think that's a very good point. Both the test for positive on corona and the test for antibodies, if you still have the event, are not perfect. Okay, and we don't know if they are 95% correct or 50% correct. There is a very large variance on that. And I think this is a very analogous to auditing, false positives, false negatives. Very analogous type of question. And the other interesting question, Ching, is how do you relate the fallacy of tests to that graph that we had, that I put here? Because each one of those tests, several places that can be a test, or have these kind of false positive, negative. Go to hospital, don't go to hospital. Maybe you should have gone to hospital, but you don't have money. The ambulance didn't take you. Or you decided you didn't want to take your chances of going to hospital. My friends who are doctors in, not in corona-related things, like they say that their practices are empty. They have nothing to do. Because no one wants to go to a hospital or to a doctor's office today because they're afraid to get corona. Newspaper talking about doctor talking about appendectomies, and say they happen, you know, in the hospitals they have several of them a day, and now they are not having them except in the cases that the person already busted the appendix and is ready to die. Okay, and which cure takes much longer because they just don't want to go to hospital. That's a very good point, and the accuracy of tests is a very, very good point. And the other thing is antibody tests, meaning see if you are resistant, are still not very well proven, not very well tested. Base a lot of policy on these tests. You are going to have some difficulties. And the other thing is both levels of test have many, many versions, and some versions are better than the others.
No, there's another weakness in the system. I think it's a very important one, because for people who recover, there's no the guidelines are do not get tested again. Like if you feel better and you've been symptom free. So let's say the guideline now, at least for New York, I don't know if it's everywhere, is that if 14 days have passed since your first symptoms and you've been 3 days symptom free, then you're assumed to have recovered and you're free to go. So you can be out of quarantine and you can just go about your life. I mean, of course, you have to wear a mask. Everybody does anyway. But you even generate a letter on your own. They have a letter that's on the website of here we have the Westchester County. You can go and you can just click that yes, it's been 14 days and you're symptom free for the last 3 days, and you're now out of quarantine. I didn't believe it, and the doctor said that's the only thing they do now. And then we got a call from the that they're not giving you another test because they still don't have many. But that's a big weakness because yes, you may be recovered, but they don't know if you're contagious. They don't know if you have the virus and you're gonna go about giving it to other people. It's just that's a little scary there. That's another thing that I think is a big weakness.
Andrea, I don't. In Taiwan, I don't know if Taiwan or Korea, they found 160 cases of after the person was tested and twice and declared cleared, that the symptoms came back.
Yeah, I did hear that. Yeah. And there's some people that say that it might take up to 30 days for the virus to get completely out of your system. Having symptoms appear. So it's just, that's another thing there to consider.
And so, go ahead.
Me? No,
I thought someone else had a comment.
No, I don't think so.
Not sure if you saw, but Facebook, he opened a survey, and I think this is going to be a good indicator as well. Because I was thinking about maybe that's just my idea, but maybe we're testing as we have a limit test. Don't you think that we may be testing the wrong people, and we should consider everybody that has symptoms potential coronavirus? And if you want to know how this should focus on asymptomatic people, because if they are the major, but we don't have any idea where they are, but these are the exactly person that we are not testing, right? We are not testing asymptomatic. I think this is the other blind spot that we have.
I think, Marcelo, you're right. I think I wanted to talk about that. The 2,000 random sample of Governor Cuomo is an attempt to deal with detection of asymptomatic and to understand how frequent they are in the population. And the numbers of different tests or different estimates range from 25% of people that get corona totally asymptomatic to something like 9 out of 10 are asymptomatic. No one knows. And so I think you are right. This is a very, very big hole. Meaning, there was Ahad Zakaria, the guy from CNN, entered. His conclusion was that frequency of asymptomatic was very large, although I don't think he had numbers there. And basically, he interpreted that saying, therefore, the denominator of number of deaths per cases becomes much larger. Therefore, he estimated that the corona was terribly more lethal. That was his conclusion. But the other part of the story is that because there are so many asymptomatic transmitters, it's a much more dangerous flu because much more people get it.
Yes, and now I was thinking, for instance, if have some people with very bad situation, like for example, they are in the UCI, But we are still focused on testing on them, but we don't have any treatment, right? So shouldn't we just consider them as a potential coronavirus and treat it as we will do whatever we're gonna do? Because
I think Marcelo, I think that's being done in Brazil, correct? In Brazil, if you have some symptom, and you are maybe in a hospital, they don't test you. I thought Gustavo say something like that.
Well, if it's happening in whole Brazil, but I know that they are just testing in Santa Catarina, like my state, just the more serious cases.
Yeah, meaning the test shortage is a source of bias because makes all the filters more, you filter much more cases out of testing. And unless you have a random testing, the numbers don't say too much. Any other comment, guys? Come on, be brave. Hanshin, do you have any comments?
I will share the Facebook survey.
Say that again.
I will share here the Facebook survey about symptoms they are doing here in the United States.
Yeah, they have been very criticized because they say it's a bias sample. But I think it's better bias than nothing. I think it's good that they are doing that. Hanshin, you have any ideas?
Actually,
Yes, I am going to call on people to make sure that everyone is awake.
okay. Actually, I'm interested in the selection of sample by the government tumor. I suppose that the selection of this sample is very important. Instead of just selecting the sample by random, perhaps we can select this sample by big features of the total population in New York. Perhaps we can do the full testing on this portable sample, and then we can do some statistical inference to see what's the total population's situation by using this sample. So I suppose if we want to do the statistical inference, the sampling stratified sampling can be more accurate and more useful compared with random sampling.
I like that. I like that. And that's actually, I was going to go into this a little bit. I think we need really these dimensions. We need a dimension of geography. We need maybe a dimension of symptomatic.
Yes.
Maybe we need a dimension in boxes and sample on the boxes, you might get better information.
Yes.
Any other ideas, guys?
I have one more thing. I think there's one more statistic that would be useful in understanding the impact of the virus so that policies can be shaped around it. Because the classic thing they've said from the beginning is that people who are older or they have underlying conditions, they're the ones that are more vulnerable. But actually, it looks like, or it sounds like from stories that come out, that that's not always the case. I mean, I have several friends who are nurses, and they're telling me that the hospitals are actually filled with the age group of 40 to 50, that they get very, very seriously ill. But I haven't seen those statistics out then, but that's what I've been hearing. And then also in the news, you hear a lot of stories about people who are, 30, they're outliers, and they had no underlying conditions, and they died. And then you hear some other stories about the 91-year-old lady who survived it. So I mean, collecting maybe numbers on that and seeing what the numbers are in those. Very these two, let's say the common cold and the flu, and then comparing what they're called outliers, these statistics to the outliers of the other kinds of similar illnesses, I think it's helpful understanding, how this diagram follows through as well, and understanding what the right denominator is. And it might be different kind of numerators and denominators depending on people will be, in fact, influenced. Yes.
I always felt that the news media created a whole set of cases, maybe because they are notorious, and they can, as you said, we really don't know if this case of a 30-year-old getting sick is statistically very small, or it's substantive. In the news media, certainly sounds like people in the forum.
Last night in the news here in Westchester, there was one 35-year-old personal trainer. He's actually a founder of one of the, it's kind of like a famous group of trainers. So he had no underlying conditions. He was very healthy, exercised, active, young. But on the for 9 days, and then he just died. So that was in the news last night.
Yeah, these are. I thought someone was trying to say something. Okay, so I have one more. What are the policy objectives of the analysis that we are going to do to help those rules? And what are we going to be looking for? And do you have any idea, Enchin? Maybe in a couple of weeks, or maybe even next week, some states are going to start relaxing very tight quarantine and etc. So the question is here, what kind of studies should be done to support that economy needs to open up? And how do you manage this? What kind of analysis needs to be done?
Yeah, actually, I heard from the news that